the tools that I would need to be successful, which is amazing. But more often than those tools sped me up, which is what they were meant to do, they slowed me down.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the RevAmp podcast. I'm your host, Mark Lerner, and I'm really excited. Today we have Matt with us, and we're going to kind of jam on all things revenue operations and kind of the agile approach to that. But before we jump into it, Matt, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself, your background, kind of what you're doing today, and how you got to your current, role.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for having me. Excited for the conversation. So I think I should start. I started as a professional salesperson. My first real professional job out of college, and not too long after that, landed at a B2B tech startup selling SaaS. It's one of those companies where it was well funded. They wanted to invest in giving people like me the tools that I would need to be successful, which is amazing. But more often than those tools sped me up, which is what they were meant to do, they slowed me down.
Mm.
I feel like you're in the jungle with one of those big tactical backpacks, maybe behind enemy lines, and everything that's in that backpack needs to be there. Otherwise, it's just dead weight, right? And so this was 10, 15 years ago, I felt myself just rummaging through the backpack to like, do I really need this? And so I just couldn't resist the urge to dive in and start solving problems around data and technology and trying to make sure those things were actually speeding me up the way that they were meant to. And so I, started managing sales teams, and same dynamic applied, getting our data to be better, and our tools to be better, and obviously processes are wrapped up into that. And eventually the company I was working for just said, hey, do that full time, like not just for your team, but for all of the teams. And work with the CFO and the operations team and just help us with that part of our business. And so it just was a natural evolution. It wasn't something I intended to do. And then, so what I'm doing today is exactly that. I'm at my third, early stage tech startup. I, have started as a team of one, like I generally do, and just building the function and the organization from scratch, having a lot of fun. RevOps is changing really quickly right now, especially with AI. And so it's been interesting to have context with, the sort of the traditional way to do things, and then trying to relearn and retrain myself on the newer ways to do things.
Yeah. Why do you think, what do you think it was about what you were doing in that early role where the company was like, hey, why don't you do that for like as a job and for everybody? What do you think was the thing that caught their eye?
So at the time, I was running an inside sales team. They were mostly just an SDR team.
Mm-hmm.
And I had really good data. Yeah, I actually used my data and inspected it, and it would give me clues about how to manage. It would give us accurate predictions about results. And I wasn't doing anything. It wasn't rocket science. It was just the fundamentals, right? Like meeting with your team, looking at the data in one-on-ones and team meetings. When it was wrong, asking them to fix it, making sure they had processes to do that where they weren't, spending hours a day in the CRM doing data entry. And when I would give updates to the leadership team about the status and health and direction of my team, they were data driven. The data was very clear and easy to ingest for a busy executive. And that was one aspect of it where, I think almost any executive, regardless of what business you're in, they just want reliably accurate data that tells them real insights about their business. And there's not this huge gap between data and decision. So often you look at data and it's a kaleidoscope and your eyes cross and you're not sure what to do with it, or if it's even good in the first place, and so it takes work. And a lot of times that's the work you do in RevOps, is to get from that to, okay, here's data that you can actually use. It's maybe not even data, it's just the insights.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
put
it's like, if you have too much information, it's just as bad as not having enough of information, because it's all noise and it's so hard to sift, the signal from the noise. I want to take a step back a little bit and kind of dig into a little bit of your approach and your experience from RevOps, starting in a role where you're maybe, you come in and either you're building RevOps from the ground up, or you're kind of a lone wolf in the RevOps role, and going forward from that. How do you develop your kind of methodology and process for building out that role, whether it's kind of defining the processes that are going to be incumbent on that role, or deciding on either buying or building tools? Like, what's your thoughts around that and the methodology that you use?
That's a great question. So I think having been a consultant, just a solo freelance consultant for a period of time, was really helpful for me. What you learn to do as a consultant is you learn to get really good at stakeholder conversations. If I'm starting as a new RevOps hire, especially if I'm a team of one, often that company will give me a charter and they'll tell me, Matt, we need you to go do X, Y, and Z, top priorities for the business. And those might be the right priorities, and they might not. And so the right thing for me to do as a professional is to meet with all of the key stakeholders and kind of set the charter aside temporarily and ask good questions to understand what all of the problems are. Now, one thing that I heard, I don't remember when I heard it, but I've never forgotten it, which is like the textbook definition of product management. And it's very applicable to RevOps. And there's three parts of one sentence. And that's that product management is about defining user problems that are worth solving today. So not all problems are user problems. Not all user problems are worth solving. And not all problems that are worth solving are worth solving today. And so kind of applying that to all of the problems that people tell you they have that hold them back, you're going to get a list that outweighs your capacity to actually address it. And so then it becomes, a roadmap exercise. What are the most profitable areas for me to focus on?
Who are the users in this scenario?
What's that?
Who are the users in the RevOps context?
Okay, so literally everybody. I mean, you have different levels, right? So you have your actual sales people that are in the trenches. They have a quota. They feel the weight and pressure of that quota, and they have problems that are holding them back from going as fast as they know that they can. That's one type of user that's really important, because ultimately, if you don't help that user, you're dead weight. Like your job, you don't have a quota in RevOps. You don't generate revenue. So if you're not making the teams that do more efficient, then you can't justify your expense. And then there's executive users that want data and dashboards, and maybe what they're asking for is important. Maybe it's not. Maybe the way they're asking for it is correct, and maybe it's not. And so it's really 360 degrees.
Yeah. How do you, especially in a team of one or a small team, an agile team, you probably have requests coming from every angle, from all users in this scenario, and each of them are probably saying, this is the most important thing. So how do you A, prioritize, and B, how do you deliver without, spending, X amount of months on this and leaving, that completely to the side?
So I had to learn the answer to this question the hard way, and it probably took me way too long to do that. If you're not intentional and proactive about managing the demand for what you do, then it becomes whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Every time you focus on one thing, you're not focusing on anything else. And those teams that tell you it's a top priority feel neglected or let down. And so if you try to have this sort of like daily iterative approach where you wake up in the morning, you look at the pile of work, and you say, that's the most profitable thing for me to do today, it's a mistake. I mean, even if you're right about what it is, you're not doing your job, which is managing expectations, setting expectations in the first place, getting buy-in on what your roadmap is and should be. And so that's the wrong thing to do. The right thing to do is what I do is on a quarterly basis, I meet with key stakeholders, success, sales, channel, finance. I do the whole process over again that if I were starting at, on day one, I'd be doing. And I'd say, hey, here's what I have on my list of what's important that is relevant to you. Help me prioritize that. Is there anything missing? And then I put everything together and I have a master list of here's what I'm going to do in Q1 or here's what I'm going to do in FY25.
Mm-hmm.
And I present that back to the stakeholders because this is the most important part. That list is two things. It's a list of what you're going to do and it's a list of what you're not going to do. And when everybody says yes, and they might not say yes, and if they don't, it's a great thing you had the conversation, right? Because you want to get it in the right order. But when everybody buys into that, it becomes a lot easier to say, thanks for the request. It's a great idea. I will put that on the roadmap because right now I have to focus on what we already agreed is the most important thing for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of it is what I'm describing is just sort of like professional maturity that people often start with, but I had to learn the hard way by dealing with the sort of deluge on a daily basis and feeling like I'm never going to get to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah. Do you do it in a like sprint model, or is it just like quarterly? These are all the tasks we're going to knock out. These are the things that we're not touching this quarter. Excuse me.
Um, I try to have plans that I am able to commit to as often as that's possible. It's rarely, I mean, I try to have plans as often as I can. But when you're a startup, especially, I work for early stage startups, things change quickly. Priorities change. You want to change direction. You need to iterate or pivot. And so you have to have an agile approach to keeping your roadmap. I've never worked for big enough companies where you're able to do planning in quarters and years, and then the quarter ends and the year ends, and you stuck to it, and you set out to do something and got it done.
How do
And
you
so
how do you juggle, you have your roadmap of things, but obviously, like you said, you're in a startup, emergencies, fires, whatever pop up. How do you juggle, those, or the how critical those might be with your roadmap and where to fit it in?
so there's a couple ways to do it. One of them is to map urgency and importance.
Hmm.
Right? And so there's these traditional like classic matrices. I think Warren Buffett had one where it was about urgency and importance. And if it's urgent and important, you do it today. If it's not urgent and not important, you delete it. And then there's what if it's urgent and not important, etc. Um, those are helpful to determine what the priority should be in the first place, and if you need to really set something important aside to do something that's urgent. Um, it's easy to get caught in what I've called the tyranny of the urgent, which is if that's what you let dictate your workload and how you spend your time on a daily basis, you can justify it. You can say, hey, this is a customer issue. I'm going to do it today because it's urgent. But over time, if it means you're neglecting important work, then it was a mistake. And so it's another, it goes back to how developed your skills are at saying no.
Yeah.
It takes skill and experience, I think, to do that, especially when it's, an executive at the company and or even every executive at the company, they're saying, hey, this is what matters most right now.
Yeah.
You have to grow into being able to challenge that.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough. I think I suffer from it. I'm sure a lot of people suffer from it, wanting to people please. And part of that is saying yes to things, even if you don't necessarily think you can deliver on it, or if it's, that it's really the highest priority. It sounds like, with your ability to kind of have a feel for or map out the urgency and when to say no, and the comfort in doing that was probably developed over time, and maybe through some blood, sweat, and tears, I would imagine. So what would you say to someone maybe earlier in their career that's kind of struggling with that? Like, especially the idea of, saying no to potentially their boss or their boss's boss.
Yeah, so first of all, I definitely haven't mastered this skill set.
Yeah.
I'm able to talk about it a lot because I think about it all the time because I know I still have more to do there, and until I get it right, I'm going to continue to struggle with prioritization and just workload management, burnout, right? You have too much on your plate and you say yes to all of it, you're going to burn out. It's almost inevitable. Um, that said, I've gotten better at it over time. And if I were like talking to the V1 of me in RevOps 10 years ago and trying to give myself some advice, um, the first thing I would say is have a roadmap. Just have one and make it yours, not something that somebody else gives you, right? If you have to own your own roadmap, especially if it's your team, right? I have yet to experience being a resource on somebody else's RevOps team. I've always run the team or been the team myself. So it's easy for me to say that that's what you should do. Um, I also think there's a couple of tactical skills that are helpful. One of them is when data is being requested, just always ask the question, why do we need this? What does it tell us about our business? Um, if you let people tell you what to build and how to build it without telling you why, then it's going to ping pong back and forth. You're going to go build what you think is being asked for. You're going to deliver it, and whoever's asking for it will say, that's not really it, right? Because you're letting a lawyer design a bridge, right? And so focusing on the why in those conversations is really helpful. Just make sure that you're doing it right the first time as much as possible. Um, and I think having an agile approach works really well in situations like that where you're trying to move quickly.
Yeah.
Versus, you don't want to take a request, go into a hole for 2 weeks and build something and find out you built the thing wrong or you built the wrong thing. And it was a waste of 2 weeks. You should have, built an MVP, a prototype, gotten feedback on it directionally, make sure that you're on the right track, and that should ideally be part of your process.
What does that
Uh,
look like, the building an MVP internally? Like, do you have like how do you define the minimum viable features or functionality that would be involved in something like that?
so there's an agile definition of quote unquote done, right? Which is like the first time it actually functionally does the thing being asked for. Even if the design isn't there, the usability isn't there, you haven't trained anybody on it, it's sort of done when it does the thing. Um, and so that's ultimately the goal of building a prototype. And another thing I've learned is it's really easy to ask for directional feedback the wrong way. I can't tell you how many times I've shown a prototype to a team of people or an executive and I said, hey, here's what I have so far. What do you think? And then they inevitably criticize it for not being a finished product. And so I've just learned expectation management is super important when you do this. It's just a conversational detail, right? But making sure that you label things as work in progress, make sure that you preface those conversations by saying, hey, there's a lot to do, and here's what I have left to do. But for now, in this conversation, I'm asking for directional feedback so
Mhm.
that when it is finished, it's finished the right way. Um, that's again, I'm just kind of talking about things I've learned the hard way by making lots and lots of mistakes throughout my career.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're hardwired to provide criticism to something we're shown as if it's the final product. It's like, I think it's hard to get people to fully understand that this is a work in progress. I want to make sure that, I get buy-in from you all before I do all this other stuff, because then I'm just going to deliver something that you don't need. I think everyone has kind of had that experience a little bit. How do you make the decision of whether to build something internally, some sort of internal tool connecting existing systems, or using code, low code, no code, whatever, APIs, or actually going out and purchasing a tool? Like, what's your, rubric for that decision-making process? I assume you've probably done both. Yeah.
So it's a great question. I think it's actually the most important factor when you're evaluating either should I build or buy, or even if you're decided you're going to buy something, evaluating a vendor. And that factor is the operational weight of the decision. Way too often, I see companies make those decisions by evaluating the functional requirements and technical capabilities of the thing. And so if I were to go out and evaluate a CPQ, I might say, okay, the most important things for me are, can it do multi-currency, advanced configuration, CLM, and subscription management? I'm going to go out and I'm going to find all the vendors that do all those things and then pick the one that does it the best. And you've completely failed to factor in the operational weight of that solution. And it might be that you pick that vendor and now you're married to a consulting group that has all the domain knowledge about how to make changes or implement it in the first place. And for every dollar you're spending on the solution itself, you're spending 5 or 10 on services, just trying to get it up and running or manage it over time as your business changes. The same, I think, criteria applies to building, right? If you build something yourself, yes, you didn't, it's the free puppy syndrome, right? Like, hooray, we got the puppy for free, but you're not like factoring in all the dog food, and maybe it's allergic to kibble, and now you're like at this specialized, dog food joint, and there's a vet bill, and there's and just your time. There's all these other kind of hidden expenses where if you build something that is a solved problem in the market, and there's vendors out there that do it, and they care about it, and that's their reason for existence, and they have developer teams that are updating it, and hey, like, why would you want to build it to save yourself, this much money? So, and maybe I'm just kind of speaking from my experience as very often a team of one, like the finite resource, yes, obviously budget, but really it's operational bandwidth to support things.
Right.
So, I guess that's most of my answer. I even that being said, I build probably more than I should. Right? I customize more than I should because it's fun and because I can. And there's always a philosophical debate like, okay, is now the time to take all of that customization, replace it with something native that somebody else has built, or should I just do one more workaround?
I'm laughing because I can identify. And, you mentioned early, at the beginning, how there was some interesting, the introduction of AI into the world, and from a RevOps perspective has kind of added a new interesting layer and made things more exciting. I'm always interested to know from your, in your day-to-day, how, has AI kind of been part of your workflow? Has it made things different, more efficient, or is it still just kind of like a parlor trick to like write your kids a bedtime story really quickly? Because that's what I've used it for as well.
It's definitely not a parlor trick.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you'd asked me several years ago, I would have been much more skeptical. But um, on a daily basis, I can go to ChatGPT and ask it questions about how to do things in Salesforce, and it'll give me the right answer. And maybe I already know 90% of the answer, you need the other 10. Maybe I only know 10% of the answer and it gives me the 90, but it's this oracle that you can consult and get good information from today, even if you don't really know what the question should be. So that's sort of the most obvious layer of how AI is changing RevOps. Beyond that, I don't think I've worked for companies that are able to benefit from the type of AI that has been around, I think, the longest, or the use case for AI that's the most established on a revenue team, which is, hey, we're going to find the needle in the haystack in your revenue data, right?
Yeah.
When your pipeline is hundreds or thousands of opportunities and you can't realistically manually go through them, then yeah, AI, what a great way to pick out the highest potential accounts or the most meaningful opportunities and make sure that those are resourced the way that they should be. What So that's one use case that's been around for a while, and I don't have as much experience in that, but I understand the value. The one that does, I think, have sort of universal applicability is conversational AI.
Yeah.
So language models are getting sophisticated enough that they're very accurate in their transcriptions, that they're very accurate in being able to summarize, and you're able to start doing summarization across not just like your single call recording from Gong, right? But you can open up an account and say, okay, across all of my interactions, emails, chat messages, um, recorded Zoom calls and phone calls. Have we ever talked about pricing with this account? Or what is this account's pain points? The account executive left. We're reassigning it to somebody new and they need to get up to speed. And they probably don't want to listen to 12 different hour-long recorded Gong calls. They just want to sort of consult the Oracle and say, hey, bring me up to speed. What's the situation? Um, and there's so many use cases for that. And all of them they're not black magic. They're very concrete, easy to understand value for how you should, um, going back to bridging the gap between data and decision. There's a very small gap there. It's like it's telling you what decisions to make, what the best next actions are, and who to engage and how. So there's a lot of use cases there. And yeah, that's not really as much about revenue operations. It's not about how I do my job, but it's all intertwined.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like that seems like the lowest hanging fruit of AI for like this kind of role, right? Like the thing that people, salespeople always get hammered for is like, did you update the CRM? Did you update the notes, right? And it's like AI is like a perfect use case for AI, right? I think Gong is doing it pretty well, but it's like very kind of hard to say simple, but in the context of AI, it's like dead on. And I think it's that actually helps a huge amount of filling a gap, and saves time and data, like you said. Um, finding that hidden signal in the noise of your data, I think we're all kind of looking for that. And I play around with AIs a lot to do something similar things. Um, but yeah, it's tough. I think that the Copilot use case where it's like, I need to figure out how to use this API and I kind of know, but I just need that 10% extra, and like not having to slack a guy on the dev team, but being able to just interact with ChatGPT. I think that's actually more impactful than people realize, in terms of efficiency. So yeah, I'm just fascinated by it, because it seems like there's kind of a few camps. There are the people that are like afraid the machines are going to take over and we're going to turn into just batteries for the machine or whatever, like the Matrix, and that won't use these tools on principle. I fear for those people. In terms of I fear for their professionally, they're just, it's like I refuse to drive a motor car. I'm going to ride my horse everywhere. And then there are the people that think that AI is going to solve everything right now, and I think a lot of us, I don't know, I fall somewhere in the middle. It sounds like you do as well. But I guess to close things up, we're kind of in the early innings of 2024 here. 2023, like the years prior, was like a huge kind of revolution. Especially AI was kind of the forefront of that. There was a lot of macroeconomic challenges. What do you think 2024 is going to shake out like? What's going to be the thing, like the AI moment that we had in 2023? What do you think that's going to look like in 2024?
And I haven't thought about it. I like the question. I wish I had a good answer for you. I'll tell you what we are navigating right now is, having looked at our revenue engine, and I always try to sort of isolate the primary constraint. Um, and I think right now what we need more than anything else is to just find ways to do better at generating pipeline. That is being massively disrupted right now by AI. And so one of the options on the table is, oh, let's build an in-house SDR team. Let's give them the traditional Zoom Info or Apollo or whoever, plus outreach or some sales engagement technology. And then they'll be, putting those together, building sequences and reaching out. And it feels like we would be going backwards if we were to take that traditional approach. And if we got great people and gave them those tools, they could produce a result, no doubt about it. But is it the most efficient way to do, especially outbound, right? If you have a high degree of inbound, then yeah, you need good people to make sure that the customers that are coming to you, they're interested, are getting service the way that they should be. But for outbound, I'm not sure I'm I know that I'm not enthusiastic about investing in a traditional model there. And so and part of the problem is because of AI, right? Because it's so easy to generate content and it's so easy to simulate personalization at scale. And it's so easy to send a massive amount of emails and LinkedIn messages from, bots that aren't even real that have their own LinkedIn profile. And it's just there's so much more noise than there ever has been that I'm like picturing myself as an SDR in today's world. I'm competing with that and trying to cut through the noise and get just that much attention from somebody. I feel like you know, I'd be doing it wrong. And so I think there's definitely a scramble right now for companies to solve that problem and to say we are the solution for AI outbound. And we've talked to a lot of companies out there that are doing it. They're all taking very different approaches, ultimately trying to achieve the same result. Some of them are the co-pilot where it's like, hey, we'll be an extension of your existing team. We'll help them with personalization. We'll help them with research and outreach, and we'll just amplify them. And then others are taking, no, we're going to be the autopilot. We're fully autonomous, and we're basically giving you, we're doing 99% of it and giving it to you to do the last mile. And so I'm very interested to see how that part of um, the industry evolves. And it's an arms race, right? Whatever works doesn't work forever because then companies will develop some way to filter out the noise, and then there's a new way to get through the filter, um, and it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to watch. But that's I don't know. There's probably a lot of other things that are going to be happening, but that's the one I'll be paying the closest attention to.
Yeah, definitely the challenge of noise and going outbound is huge. I was at a sales leader dinner the other week, and it was kind of universal around the table that A, they're going more aggressively outbound, and B, it's a challenge. Um, so
You have to think about it from the buyer perspective too, right? Buyers are more inundated than ever. And there's been this like trend of who do they listen to? They used to listen to companies and what companies said about themselves and what marketers like you would put on the website and what, SDRs would say to them over the phone. And I don't think they're as willing to listen to anybody else, but possibly their own peers, people that they have actually met before, ideally, and know are real people and have had similar experiences. And so I'm expecting for there to be more sort of communities of people in leadership roles that want to network with each other so that they can just kind of have a place to go for good information. Whereas otherwise, if you go to LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm looking for an XYZ solution, it's like you're dangling a piece of meat in front of a piranha infested pool. And so, um, I've seen that happen a lot. There's even communities for revenue operations that I'm a part of. I think that's how we met in the first place. And I expect it to keep happening.
awesome. Well, time flies when you're having fun. We're
Oh
at
wow, yeah.
past 30 seconds here, but before we head out, why don't you tell the folks at home where they could maybe learn a little bit more about you or SupportLogic, get a little bit more information.
Learn about me. Oh, okay. I'd say LinkedIn. I have a unique enough name that you can find me when you look for me. I like to network with people and share ideas and experiences. And I definitely don't have all the answers, and so I've had a lot of help throughout my career, and I'm happy to participate in that and give back as often as I can. Um, and yeah, SupportLogic. I love working here. We have an awesome product and really great customers. What we do is we help our customers understand and analyze their post-sale interactions so that they can extract signals from those conversations. They can understand the voice of the customer. They can know and what the sentiment is, and if customers are frustrated or happy or at risk of churning or want to buy more. And